Part two of this video series will now have us look at solving different problems, including percents in regard to applications where we can use proportions, or we can use equations to represent this scenario. So let's look at this first one. Martin and Maria, they purchase, they're grocery shopping. So we've got $124.45 for groceries. So that's the amount, and now we need to look at the tax, which is the 5%. And remember, 5% out of 100 would be 5/100ths as your tax. So most rest of these are simply just calculations. So $124.45 times 5/100ths, and that's going to give us $6.22. Now that's the amount of tax. That's not total bill, because we know how much it rang up to be. So $124.45 times the percentage that's going to be taxed is $6.22. Well, that's going to then be added on. When we're talking about sales tax, going to be added on with the $6.22. So we got $124.45 plus $6.22. So that's going to equal $130.67 of what Martin and Maria have to pay with total, and that's with tax. Now, let's look at another way to do that. If you like that method, you understand that method, then I want you to go with it. That's fine. Another method is, well, notice that we took the percentage of the total, and then we added that percentage to the total. Okay, so what we have here is everything, we're still paying the 100%. So we're going to pay 100% of the total, which is $124.45. We're also going to pay 5%. So which really means you're paying 105% on these groceries. So 105% as a decimal is 105 divided by 100, which is 1 5/100. So another method is, if you know the total, which is $124.45, you could multiply it by 1 5/100. So $124.45 times 1 5/100, and you result in $130.67. So you get the same answer as we found up here. It's just really what method kind of makes sense to you and which one do you understand. Here we're looking at tax. Sales tax is going to be added on. That's why we see the number larger than where we started. So let's look at this one. The furniture store has all the sofas. Now we're looking at discounted. So we're discounted 40% off. So if the original price is $785.99, and we want to take 40% off, well, remember, your 40% is 40 out of 100, or 4/10. So what I could do is multiply $785.99 times 40/100ths, and that's going to give us the amount of the discount. So $785.99 times 4/10 or 40/100ths, and that's going to give us $314 and roughly 40 cents. Okay, that is the amount that was discounted. So like it said, if the original price was this amount and you're discounting it, it's got to be lower. Okay, but that doesn't mean that it's $314 now. That's just how much you were discounted. So you're going to actually take $785.99 and subtract the discounted price. So if you take the $785.99 minus the $314.40, you're going to get the price after the discount, which would be $471 and approximately 60 cents. That's your new price of your sofa. So notice with the discount, we had to multiply by the discount, which was 40% off. Figure out that discounted amount, subtract it. So now let's look at another way. If you're discounted 40% off, so you think about it, if it's 100%, 100% would be the $785.99. That's the 100%. Well, you're taking off 40%. So what are you really paying? You're really paying 60% of that sofa. So what we could do is, since we're only paying 60% of the sofa, we could say, well, what is the original price? It's $785.99. So what if we only multiplied it by 600s or 60 hundreds, 6/10 or 60 hundreds? So that's representing our 60%. So $785.99 times 600s, and you get directly that amount. It goes directly. Notice that's what we found originally. So it kind of, you're still doing the subtraction, as you see. It kind of saves you a step in your thinking. So that's one way where we can use equations to model. So here we've got a waitress, and she received a tip of $8.50. Now what this was, or is $8.50 is 20% of the cost of the meal. So it's 20% of the cost of the meal. What the problem is we're saying X is the cost of the meal, and we don't know what the meal would be. However, if we think about that, 20% times the cost of the meal is going to equal $8.50. So how would we solve for the cost of the meal? Right, since we see multiplication, we're going to divide. So we would take the tip received, which is $8.50, and divide it by 20 hundredths, and we're going to get $42.50. That would be the cost of our meal. And you can substitute that back in and check that if you like. So let's say that the waitress is serving a table of 7 people, for which the restaurant automatically adds a service charge. So we're saying that in this case, you've hit the maximum number, or you've hit a number where we're going to add the service charge of 15% of the cost of the meal. Well, if the meal costs $127.40, how much is the service charge? So automatically adds the service charge of 15%. So we could look at it as, well, it's 15%, right? So if you take the meal, which is $127.40, and multiply it by 15 hundredths, you're going to get $19.11. So that's 15% of the meal. So what are we going to do with that number? Well, you're going to add it. You're going to add it to the $127.40 meal, because that's your 15%. And when you add that together, you get $146.51. So that table of 7, the total would be $146.51. The service charge would be that $19.11 because it was 15% of that total amount. Here we're looking at Angela. She answers 86% of the questions on a test correctly. If there's 50 questions on the test, how many did she answer? Well, 86% would be written as 86 hundredths. And if we knew the total number, which we do, so if you take 86 hundredths and multiply it by 50, that will give you total correct on the test. And that product would give you 43. So 43 out of 50 is the same as 86 out of 100. Here we're looking at a different topic where we're looking at percent increase. So we can kind of see, well, how much from the original amount did it increase or did it decrease? And then we can figure out that percentage. And there's a couple of different ways to do that we'll look at. He inherited this marble top table and it appraised at $420. Well, the insurance company says, well, we'd like to have it reappraised to see if it, did it drop? Did it add in its worth? Well, it's actually $1,200 now. So what's the amount of the increase? Well, the amount of the increase is just kind of figuring out the difference between the two. So the 1,200 minus 420, and that difference is $780. So it says, what's the amount of the increase? Well, it's $780 was the increase. So what's the percent of increase? Okay, well, there's a couple of different ways to do that. Let's look at one method. So we'll look at method one. What we can do is take the difference in the two and then divide that difference by the original. I'll say that again, because sometimes students forget kind of where the numbers go and whatnot. When you're looking for percent increase, you can actually subtract the two and divide by the original. The original amount was what it was appraised, but then it increased to $1,200. So we know it increased. So that $1,200 minus 420, that's $780. We knew that from over here. $780 divided by 420. And what is that going to give us? That's going to give us 1 85 hundredths. But that's not as a percentage. That's just a decimal value. So if you multiply that by 100, you're going to get 185% increase. Method two, you could take your new price, which was $1,200, and divide it by your old price or your original price, which was $420. When you take that quotient, you're going to get 2 85 hundredths. Well, that's a decimal amount, and I want to change it to a percentage, so I'm going to multiply it by 100. So I get 285%, and I'm going to subtract 100% from it, and I get 185% as my increase. So 285%, take away 100%, and I'm left with 185% because it was an increase. And we'll see what happens, especially with this method, what it looks like when we have a decrease. So there's a couple of different methods there. If you like method one, which is subtract the two prices, divide by the original price. So here's your difference divided by the original. We get a decimal amount that we multiply by 100 to give us a percentage. Or part two, we take the new price, divide it by the old price, and we get a decimal. Multiply the decimal by 100, and that gives us a percentage that we take 100% from to give us our percent increase. Here we've got the price of a TI-84 calculator. It dropped from $120 down to $79. So if we looked at method A that we looked at before, we would take the difference of the two. So take 120 minus 79, and we're going to divide it by the original. The original was 120. So we know it dropped. So we know this is going to be a decrease. So 120 minus 79, and you get $41 divided by 120. And you're going to get 34 hundredths. And if you multiply that by 100, you're going to get 34% decrease. So we've got a 34% decrease when it goes from $120 to $79. Method 2 is we can take our new price, which was 79, divided by 120. So 79 divided by 120, and we get approximately 658 thousandths. And if I multiply that by 100, I'm going to get 65.8%. And I remember I want to subtract 100% from it. And when I do that, I'm going to get a negative 34%. Well, what does that mean? Well, the negative means the decrease. Okay. And we could have found a negative amount over here too. We could have taken the new price, which is 79 minus 120, and you get a negative 41, and that negative 41 divided by 120 would give you this number, which would be negative. Multiply it by 100, you're going to get the negative 34. So the negative is just representing that it is a decrease.